Hey, today we are going to see what is a network security group and application security group. And before going to the uh, class, let's just create a scenario and see from there how we can go about and apply those NSG and ASG rules. So you imagine you have a setup like this, and you have three virtual machines, and each virtual machine is dedicated to a separate department, and you have another virtual machine in place, and you have that basically anybody can get into this master vault server through a web server, and then they can change the username, password. They can do all kinds of things in the password, right? So as I told you that we have three departments. One department is a contractor department, basically the third party guys who work for the company. Another department is basically an employee department where obviously they are working for the company. And we also have an operation department, which is HR department, right? So the scenario is only employee and HR department can hit the web server inside the vault server, and then we don't want the contractor guys to get access to the machine or the web servers, right? So this is the scenario, and everybody is working remotely. So in this scenario, how are we going to go and restrict the contract servers, and basically the contract employees, not to have access to those? And that's when we have those rules called network security group. So network security group is a mechanism used to filter network traffic to and from Azure resources in a Azure virtual network. It contains security rules that allow or deny inbound or outbound network traffic. So you need to have a rule in place, and the rule should have source, destination, port, and protocol. So in given this scenario, we need to mention the source for employee virtual machine, and the destination is the vault servers, and the port is web server, so it's AD, and the protocol is HTTP. Okay, so let's move on to understanding the characteristics of network security group. So network security group rules are evaluated by priority. And number two is network security groups are stateful. And if an inbound traffic is allowed over a port, it's not necessary to specify an outbound security rule, because if inbound traffic is not allowed, automatically the outbound traffic is also not being allowed. That is what the meaning of the point 3. And the number 4 point is existing connection may not be interrupted when you remove a security rule that enabled the flow. Meaning is, if you have given contractor person the access to web server, and he's already made a connection to the web server, and he's just browsing around the portal, and then you realize that you didn't add a deny rule, you can't do that after that. So only when he is trying to reload the page, that's when the new security rule will come in place, and then you will block the access. So let's just get on to the Azure portal, and then you will understand more what is network security group. Now it can be a little overwhelming. Let's move on to the practical parts, and you will have a better understanding. So let's move on to the box. Right. So I have created 4 virtual machines. One is a contractor virtual machine, another one is an employee virtual machine, and a HR window box machine is for the HR department, and I have a password vault server box. So let's get into the password vault box and verify whether our web server is up and running or not. So this is the password vault server, and I was just using the local host, and then you can see that it's printing. It says that master password vault server, only authorized person can access. So this sums up that our ISS web server is up and running in this password vault server. Now let's move on to the contractor machine. So let's hit the IP address of the password vault server, 10.0.0.7. So now he is having access to the master password vault server. Let's move on to although he should not have access because we don't have any NSG rules in place. Let's move on to the HR department. Okay, even HR department have access to the vault server. That's because again we don't have an NSG rule in place. So you might ask, how is this working? Let's move on to the password vault server. I'll show you. So if you get into the networking, and then if you go on to the inbound port rules, by default we have a rule in place that says allow VNet inbound, port any, protocol any, and virtual network. So what does it mean? It means that if all the virtual machines are on the same virtual network, then the communication between all the virtual machine can happen, and that is by default. But having said that, we don't want the contractor person to have access to this vault server. So how do we do that? Okay, so now let's get on to the password vault server and create an inbound rule. Okay, so to create an inbound rule, as I told you, we should mention source, port ranges, destination, and the port range, and then the protocol, and whether you want to allow or deny, or you need to create a priority. And then finally your port, your rule description, and then the rule name. So let's grab the IP address of the contractor box and then create an inbound deny rule. We grab the private IP address and then go on to the password vault and then networking, source. We have to mention, we can mention either IP address, or you can mention a service tag or an application security group. So I will explain what is application security group later on in this tutorial. So for now let's create IP address, and then we can paste the IP address of the contractor virtual machine in place, and then destination can be anything, but you can, if you want to have the IP address of the password vault box, and then let's just change the destination port range as 80, and TCP protocol can be anything, and then your action is always allowed. But now we don't want this person to access this, so let's go ahead and create deny rule, and then let's create 301. We can't do that, so because we already have a rule in place. So let's create 302, and then let's say deny contractor VM. So let's copy this and add. It is being successfully created. So now we can see that we have a rule in place for the contractor box, and we are saying that port 80 and the source is the IP address of the box, and then the destination is any, and then we have a rule in place called deny. So let's get on to the contractor box and then reload this page. Okay, so even after creating a deny rule, you might wonder, like, how is it possible for the person to launch the web server inside the contractor box? Let's verify the IP address. IP config. IP config. And you can see that our IP address is 10.0.0.4, and if we go back to the rule, we have clearly mentioned that he should not have access. Okay, so the reason why he's having access is because we have a rule in place called 301 that basically tells that port 80 protocol is any, and then the source is any, destination is any, and the action is allowed. So as I said in the first point, that network security rules are evaluated by priority. So the priority 301 has a precedence over 302, and that is the reason why the deny rule was not in place, meaning that if any port rule is matches, then it will not go to the subsequent rule. That is the reason why we have access to the contractor rule box. So if we go ahead and delete this rule, now we will have our deny rule in place. Let's verify that. So we have successfully deleted the rule, and it keeps giving this notification. Yes, it is done. Now we have a rule in place with a deny action for this source. Let's go on to the contractor virtual machine and reload the box. So now let's get it on to the contractor virtual machine and then try to hit the IP address of the vault server. So this is the IP address of the vault server, 10.0.0.7, and hit enter. Let's wait till it's failing, and then it goes back to the bing.com. Now you can see that it's not able to hit the password vault server, and that is because we have our NSG in place, and that takes the precedence. That is the first rule in place that says source is 10.0.4 and then deny rule. Okay, now let's get it on to the contractor. Let's get it on to the employee box and grab the private IP address of it, and then put it on to the password vault box for allow inbound rules. Allow inbound rules. So let's go on to source and IP address, and then we'll mention the IP address of the employee virtual machine, and then destination. Let's change the port to 80 and anything, and then let's mark it as 303 and then add. And same we have to do for the HR department. So let's go and grab the IP address of the HR virtual machine, and let's create another inbound rule on the password vault box. IP address of the source, and then your password private IP excuse me, and then the port, and then allow, and then you can mark it as 304, and then you can make it as 480. Okay, now we have the rules in place for a deny contractor VM, which we are already done, and we said that it's a deny action, and we have mentioned the source of the private IP address of the virtual machine of the contractor, and then another virtual machine that allows employee, we have action in place as allow, and same for the HR department. And I have mentioned all the appropriate source IP address, private IP address of the virtual machine. So now let's just get on to the HR department, and then let's reload the page. Yes, now he has access to the password vault server. Now let's move on to the contractor again, and then let's test it one more time. http://10.0.0.7 and hit enter. Now he does not have access. Yes, it can't be reached because we have a deny rule. So let's close this box. No. So why do we need a application security group? Okay, so that is the concept. So we have tested that a contractor cannot have access, the employee can have access, the HR department can have access. But since let's move on to the schematic diagram. So now we have this simple scenario where we have only 3 virtual machines, and we have all the rules in place for allow and deny. But imagine that in a company where we have thousands of virtual machines, we can't just go and write rules like this individually, like for each of the virtual machine, and then have a deny and allow in place. So that is when we have something called application security group. So what is application security group? It's basically an extension of network security group. What we do here is basically we place a placeholder on the virtual machines. Let me show you what is that. So let's go on to the virtual machine and click on the employee box. Go on to the networking, and inside we have inbound rules, outbound rules, and we have application security group. So let's go and create something called application security group in the first place. So application security group. So this is basically a template, and it does requires a resource group. So I have them. So it says allow all. Let's allow employee. So this is the placeholder mark that I'm having, and then you can, if you want, you can have the tag. Let's not have that now. Let's go and create this resource. Okay, the validation is passed and I'm creating it. I've created the application security group. Let's get on to the resource. We don't have anything much in this template now. Let's we'll move on to the virtual machine and click on the employee box, go on to networking, and then let's go on to application security group, and then you can click configure, and we should see our all allow employee application security group. So let's just click save, and then this will persist this marker in the employee virtual machine. Let's do the same for the HR Windows box as well. Give it some time, guys. So once it is done, let's move on to that. Okay, now let's move on to the HR window box, and same, we have to get into the networking and then application security group, configure, drop down, and then hit save. Okay, so now we have application security group being mapped onto the 2 virtual machines. Let's just verify that. Networking, and then when you click application security group, we have allow employee. Same for the employee, we should see allow employee ASG in place. So let's move on to the password vault box and then networking. And what we are going to do is we are going to delete these 2 rule and create just 1 rule, and then I will show you what it is. Delete. It's deleting the rule. Let's also delete the allow HR department rule. Yes. One is succeeded, another one, let's just wait. Okay, it has been deleted from the table, I can see that. Let's just give it a second. Once that is deleted, let's reload the page, and we should not see any rule for the HR or the employee. So now we don't have anything, right? So let's go and add an inbound rule now. So we have to mention the source. Now we can go and mention as application security group, and then now we will have this allow employee in place. So we can mention the destination as any for now, and then the destination port is 80, and then the protocol, and then the action is allow, and then let's just mention the name as allow _ AMP. So we'll have the priority as 312 for now. That's fine. So let's click add. So what we have done here is, instead of having 2 separate inbound rules, we have clubbed that into 1, and then we marked as 1 rule with the help of application security group. Now you can see that we have this in place, allow employee security group, which allows port 80, and then the source is allow employee and any and allowed. So let's just test one more time before we close this session. I'm in the HR department. I'm reloading the page, and you can see that master password wall server I can reach. Let me go back to the contractor. Although I have not made any change to that rule, let's just check for the sake of checking. 10.0.0.7, and we should not be able to hit the wall server. As you can see that it's taking some time and it just failed. That's it, guys. So today we learned about what is network security group and then the application security group, and what is the purpose of application security group. So that's it, and if you have any questions or doubt, please post in the comment section. And if you have any other suggestion that I need to improve on this tutorial, I'm always welcome to hear that. Thank you.